Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. Thank you, Chief Boyce, for joining us. We're here today to talk about what may come to be the biggest law enforcement and public health crisis of our time, the heroin and opioid epidemic. Our communities are flooded with heroin, fentanyl, and similar synthetic drugs. And these drugs are often even more potent and more dangerous. In this case, it's fentanyl that I'm going to talk about a little later. As you all know, the use of heroin and other opioids is reaching crisis levels in New York City. The New York City Police Department estimates that overdoses have killed 1,350 people in the last year. About 28% of these deaths have occurred in Brooklyn. That's nearly triple our homicide rate. These numbers are rising, and the deaths associated with fentanyl and its analogs are spiking. Dealing with this crisis requires a multifaceted approach that includes law enforcement, healthcare services, education, and legislation. I'm committed to doing my part to save lives and to prevent further addiction. Today we announced the indictment of 34 people on a 357-count indictment for allegedly running a massive narcotics ring that was centered in Brooklyn and supplied deadly drugs, including cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl, all over the city. After a long-term investigation, we have dismantled this operation. This was easily $1 million a year illegal business that extended through all 5 boroughs. In Brooklyn, we've identified sales that took place in East New York, Crown Heights, Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brownsville, Boerum Hill, and Williamsburg. We recovered over 10 kilos of drugs, 17 guns, and over $300,000 in United States currency. Evidence that these cases are not simply about narcotics enforcement, but about saving lives and protecting our communities. Through the use of electronic, physical, and video surveillance, we were able to expose the structure of this operation. Looking at the exhibit, at the center, we have a man named Jerome Horton, who lives in East New York. His co-conspirator is Willie Billingsley, and their main supplier, we allege, was Nigel Maloney. He lives in Phoenix, Arizona. He would send the drugs through the mail from Arizona to his accomplice, his associate, Warren Apollon, who lives in Queens, and they supplied defendants Horton and Billingsley. When this connection wasn't enough to meet the demand of all the redistributors you see on the board and the street-level dealers they are supplying, we found that this ring utilized other suppliers. So in the far right-hand corner, you see Joseph Raffone and Christian Cruz, who we allege worked together to sell heroin and fentanyl. And on the far left of the board, to your right of the board, you're going to see Jackie Hillard, who we allege supplied cocaine. Fentanyl is a relatively new drug. It's chemically related to fentanyl, an opiate that, as you may know, is responsible for more deaths than even heroin. Unlike fentanyl, this drug has no medical purpose. And according to some estimates, this drug has caused hundreds of deaths in the United States in the last year. It was added to the federal list of controlled substances at the end of last year, but it's not an illegal drug in New York State. The fentanyl in this case was imported from China. In fact, one of our search warrants discovered a DHL package shipped from China, which we allege contained this poison. This is what it looks like. This type of designer opiate presents additional challenges for us. First, it limits our charging options. We had to charge the sale of fentanyl as an attempted sale instead of the A felonies that we charge for the sales of heroin and cocaine, because New York State has not caught up with the federal laws. Second, and more importantly, these synthetic lab-made drugs compound the difficulty in dealing with this opiate crisis that we are facing in this country. These synthetics are lethal, they are cheap, and they continue to flow into our streets. Third, because of the potency of these synthetic opioids, we are finding that the heroin being sold these days has a far higher potency than we used to see in the past, which results in more people getting addicted faster, and overdosing and dying in much higher rates. So here's what we are doing. We will continue these types of investigations of supply and distribution rings, just like the one we took down today. These defendants do not care about the death and devastation they are causing. They simply care about making money. So we will use every investigatory tool to expose and prosecute these drug dealers. That will help stem the supply and reduce the violence associated with drug dealing. The guns you see on the table, the fake credit cards we also found, are all evidence to the related crimes that these conspiracies generate. We will continue to work with our lawmakers to make sure that the laws keep up with the evolving chemical makeup of the drugs we confront on the streets. But we must stay vigilant. Finally, as we attack the chain of supply, we must find a better way to address demand and the serious health issue that is heroin and opioid addiction. To that end, we will start to work with those dependent on heroin and other drugs in a different way. In Brooklyn, we will soon allow people arrested for drug possession to get a chance to enter a rehab facility before they are arraigned in court. If they participate meaningfully, their cases will not move forward. If they don't, they will be fully prosecuted. In order to really solve this problem, we need not only to arrest and prosecute the drug dealers, but we have to find a better way to treat addiction. And if arrest and prosecution are not the most effective nor fair ways to do that, then we will try another approach. So this is what I'm committed to doing. Help anyone dependent on these drugs move past their addiction, work with our legislators so that the laws stay up to date, educate the public about these drugs, and prosecute dealers and distributors just like we've done today. I would like to thank all the dedicated detectives that worked tirelessly on this case and the relentless prosecutors from my Violent Criminals Enterprise Bureau who helped put this case together. We'll now hear from Chief Boyce, and I thank everyone for coming.
Good morning, all. We talk a lot about in the police department about precision policing, and one of the reasons we take cases like this is just to do that, to keep the city safe. So 37 total arrested. We have 31 of them are blood gang members, four of which have been arrested for murder or attempted murder. 2 are prior victims of non-fatal shootings. 12 of these individuals have prior firearms arrest. 7 are on parole, and 28 have prior 7 major crime arrests in their past. We keep the city safe by precision policing, and these are old side bloods. So now we have a fusion here of heroin selling and blood gang members. very scary, something we're very concerned about. We've seen, as Eric explained, an unprecedented growth in overdose deaths due to the opioid crisis that's going on in this country, not just in this community. So we're going to continue to push on these to bring down these violence and death associated with both. Fentanyl, ordered from China, we believe on the dark web. We have some packaging that came in that suggests that that's where it came from. Fentanyl is also a derivative. So if you're looking for a knockoff on a synthetic drug, this is it. We have to catch up in New York State to make it illegal here. You saw what some very talented prosecutors did in order to get a conspiracy charge on this. So if you look at the 11 search warrants, 15-month case, really hard work. This is one of 48 cases that we've taken down citywide. We're just finishing the first quarter of this year. Last year, we took down 100 such cases like this. This is a fusion, as I said, of narcotics trafficking and violent gangs. And these are older fellows, as you can see. They're not young kids, but they're all in this game. So I want to thank some of the leadership from Brooklyn North Gang. Chief Mike Kemper to my immediate right, Inspector Inglesia, CO of Brooklyn North Narcotics, Captain Craig Ellerman, and Detective Paul Molinaro, who had the case. These things aren't done very easily. It takes a lot of work, a lot of hours, surveillance, interviewing people, putting a case together. It's been well worth it. We believe that this is just the tip of the iceberg of what we're seeing. We're going to continue pushing and making these arrests throughout Brooklyn. So as I said, we did 12 so far in the first quarter of this year in Brooklyn, another 36 throughout the city. This is how we're reducing crime. Right now, we're down 40 shootings and 8 murders from last year, which was an historic low. We're going to keep going with great detectives and great supervisors in the Detective Bureau. Thank you.